Another play is actually linking some of our features up with the tertiaries, and so we're working closely with the Media Design School to create a pathway for their students into some of the world-leading companies that are both starting to get into the AR/VR garage, but also a number of large corporate sponsors who've started to get very interested alongside us with the AR/VR garage, a number of which we're hoping will be landing with sponsorships in the next short period. Finally, on attract business investment, the only other element I hadn't covered there was just Project Palace, where we continue to work with a number of our counterparts around the country, but very closely with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise in there to help increase the overall hotel capacity in Auckland and to meet the projected demand of the visitor economy. So working across the council group there, but also linking up nationally with the important parties as well.
Martin, we'll just take the last one as read because it's just events listed, and I'm sure people can read that. So
thanks.
We have Councillor Sayers with a question, then Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your report, gentlemen. Yeah, it's a financial question, Mr. Chair. That's just, this is in context of later in the day we've got a discussion about some letters of expression with the CCOs. But if I just go back to the table that you presented on your financials, with those actual operating costs that you've shown us there, is there any way that we can, as councillors, go somewhere to drill down a little bit further into what makes up those OPEX costs? And if we can, to what depth can we drill down into those?
Currently, it is at this level for the executive, for the councillors. We do present to our board the more detail, and they go through that on a monthly basis and look into that detail. Going through our budget process, you will see a further breakdown into that details going through with the LTP process, the long-term plan, as well as the annual plan coming through to February's meeting.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Casey.
I've got two questions about conventions. My first relates to this new body called the Auckland Advocate Alliance, which you refer to on our page 78. It's a bringing together of inspiring, influential sector leaders and includes local politicians. I wonder if you could tell me which local politicians are involved in that. It's not me.
Do you know much about it? I'd have to get back to you on the detail on that one, I'm afraid, Councillor. I don't know the detail of the people on that body, but I can get that back to you.
I'd be interested in the whole thing, when you've met, what you're discussing and so on.
Yep,
and my
sure.
other one, not surprisingly, is about the Auckland Conventions Bureau. In my interest in the local government conference going to Sky City and my conversations with Brett, I understand that Sky City is marketed by the Auckland Conventions Bureau, and I find that a bit odd since ACB is a council entity within a council entity. So you have the Auckland Conventions Bureau, you're reporting on to us today, and yet you're marketing our competitors. I don't understand.
Just to that point, I understand that in providing some clarity around how this convention came to be at Sky City, Brett explained that when the local government New Zealand approached us for some recommended sites, we provided purely information relating to Auckland Council-owned assets. It was at local government New Zealand's request that Sky City was added to that mix. We don't have a policy, there is no council policy regarding Sky City's wider commercial activity, and so ACB can't assume a policy position when that's not been made. And on the basis of the information that was provided to local government, it was their decision to have the convention there.
I understand all that. Is Sky City a member of the Auckland Convention Bureau?
My understanding is that it is, yes.
If it is, then you market them as a potential convention venue. That's the bit I don't get. That's the bit I don't get. Through the chair, we have a CCO with a responsibility to the council to market our facilities to get the best deal. And yet we have membership of presumably other people that also seek your services. And Brett said ACB has to be independent. I'm saying, well, no. Surely we should be asking you to market our facilities above everybody else. Through the chair. I don't know the answer to it. I'm not happy with this.
I think the answer to it is their role is to market Auckland. So be quite honest, I would have thought the Trust Stadium, which is not council-owned in West Auckland, I'd like to think that that was being marketed by ATED and indeed RFA pushing it as well. So we have a number of entities, whether Bruce Pullman Park or whatever, that they should be marketing Auckland, and of course, yeah, there's an element of competition there, but that's where RFA has to be up to the challenge to basically beat Sky City in due course when it comes to conventions. So that's their challenge. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question goes to one of the key deliverables in terms of enabling education and talent, and particularly as it applies to ATED's involvement in promoting overseas students coming and attending New Zealand secondary schools, which of course is, for most secondary schools in Auckland, is a very important part of their financial survival these days. I'm just wondering to what extent there is, if indeed there is, an overlap between the school's personnel, many of whom have their own people specifically employed to do that sort of work, i.e. go to fairs and market their school, and ATED's involvement, and if there is a doubling up there, or if there isn't, alternatively whether ATED takes any sort of commission or cut, as I believe is the case with overseas agents doing essentially the same thing.
This is an area that we're actually looking at in much more depth now, and refocusing and reprioritising our strategy to be more focused towards bringing in high value quality students. We do work very closely with both the tertiary and the secondary schools to make sure that the promotion of Auckland as a destination to study is consistent, and we meet regularly with all of the main players to ensure that there is that consistency across the board. So I see the role that we play alongside the people who are employed in that way as complementary, not working in competition.
Okay, so does AT then have any means of measuring its benefit to schools in terms of recruiting these students, which bring in about 17 grand each?
Yes, we do. Yep, happy to provide some more detail around that.
Yeah, go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions. The first relates to your main quarterly report in regard to cruise infrastructure, and I know we've got the Ovation of the Seas coming in December 27, and that's not going to fit at any of the currently available wharfs. I'm wondering what consideration has been given to the Wynyard Wharf and what would be needed to bring that up to a standard where it could be used to berth very large ships. That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question was, you mentioned the dolphin that's planned for construction and the question of the walkway out to it, and that you would be reporting on available options to having the walkway or not having it. And I just wondered what progress you'd made in developing the options and whether or not that walkway was actually needed. If so, why?
In relation to the second part of your question, work is ongoing with Panuku Development Auckland and the ports around what an optimum dolphin would look like, and whether there is a requirement for the walkway to the dolphin. My understanding, and I apologise, I've been absent for a little while, but is that the primary issue around the walkway is around health and safety, the access for port staff to be able to get to the dolphin to securely moor the shipping vessels. We're obviously aware that there are mooring dolphins in other locations where there is not a walkway, so we're looking at that quite closely to determine whether the additional cost incurred by having the walkway is something that we actually need or not. And that is also dependent on the forward bookings. And as you've outlined, we've got a significantly sized cruise ship and more coming in the next few years. We need to make sure that we're able to accommodate those. In relation to Wynyard being a suitable location, that has also been looked at. my understanding is that there are some issues there that might take a little while to resolve, but happy to provide more detail around that.
That'd be helpful. Thank you very much for that. The second question I've got is in relation to your Grow and Attract Skilled Talent, Build Auckland, which I think is a great idea given the demand in the building industry for skills, but you haven't given us much of an indication of what the outcomes of that campaign was and were, and how you might have measured them.
Thank you. During the Build Auckland, as I said, there was about 600, I just need to check the number, but about 600 people applied through the process, and it went through a graduated stage of qualification of people being whittled down to 10 competition winners. And those 10 competition winners won about 4 weeks work experience with providers, and also some training packages that went alongside those that were provided by a number of different partners. In terms of sort of the economic impact of that in the longer terms, we're still actually working through those numbers because it's still quite fresh through the end of the campaign. So we're working through that, but there was large participation, large involvement, which came down to the 10 competition winners. The actual evaluation we'll work through.
David?
Yeah, look, there are, in the wider outcomes in terms of Build Auckland, there are metrics about how many people are targeted, so I haven't got those here, but we can bring those back to you. But there are metrics that's been trying to be achieved through that initiative in terms of the number of people being attracted in the industry.
Could I just ask through you, Mr. Chairman, a supplementary question on that? It seems a shame, you know, you've got 600 entrants and you whittle it down to 10 people who get work experience. Do you have any wider plans to focus on this area where there's obviously a huge demand, and David, you know through your own private business, because it seems to a lot of Aucklanders that getting more of our kids, particularly in South Auckland, for example, into work in the building industry would make a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah. So what Martin was referring to was a competition that was part of the Build Auckland initiative as part of a promotional activity. So it's quite tactical. As I said, there are overall numbers that we're trying to achieve in terms of the attraction of particularly younger people into the building game, particularly women coming into the game and making it much more attractive from their standpoint to be part of it. So again, I don't have exactly the numbers in terms of what we're trying to. I'll have to come back to you a bit more specifically on those, but it is quite a wide campaign. It's been going. It was kicked off 3 months ago, and you know, in the initial look, it actually is really having quite a positive effect. So it's been targeted from school leavers right through to those that are, you know, the NEETs that we're trying to pull through. I mean, overall, you know, if you look at some of the numbers, we need about 25,000 people into the building game in Auckland. Basically, there's only 2,000 people being trained a year in Auckland, some number like that. So it's a huge gap, and you know, we're not, but it's using this economic cycle as a very attractive way to bring through prospective trainees, apprentices, and other people. So look, we'll come back to you with those numbers.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Filipina.
Chair, I'm just going to ask if I could just mention the schools, even though, and that's the email based around the Lion Foundation Young Enterprise Scheme, instead of waiting for the second quarter where it fits in. I just believe that the schools, because they cover Tamaki Makaurau, should be acknowledged in regards to the youth program and the fact that they've won. So I just need your permission, if I could, just mention the schools.
Yep.
And just wanted to acknowledge AT and the Lion Foundation Young Enterprise Scheme, because there was some kura from across Tamaki that won at the national competition, and I just wanted to mention those, Olele from the Henderson High School, Ed Life from Maclean's College, Bright Life from ACG Parnell College, Te Kahui Kanorau from Te Kura Māori o Ngā Tapuwai, and the Trident App Design from Takapuna Grammar School. And we've been involved with that particular one, not only through the new council through you, Chair, but also with some of the legacy councils. So it's just awesome, and just want to acknowledge and say thank you.